Mr. Chang here. I'm going to do a quick tutorial video on 55K in iXL. Hope you enjoy. Let's get started on this. So what I want you guys to focus on when you're solving equations, solving for the unknown, is really practice this idea of reading an equation and doing the opposite of what the equation tells you to do. You're going to do the opposite math to both sides of the equation. The opposite math of both sides to both sides of an equation. That's the way you simplify and solve. Don't worry about this yellow box where it says simplify expressions by combining like terms and applying the distributive property. We're not going to use that. For this skill, we'll use that for PGH when you get there. But let's really just focus on number 2, which is reading the equation and doing the opposite of what the equation tells you. So when I say the opposite, I mean, if you see addition, you're going to do subtraction. If you see subtraction, you're going to do addition. If you see multiplication, you're going to do the opposite, which is to divide. And if you see division, you're going to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. So any math you see in an equation, any math operation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, you're going to think in your head, you're going to do the opposite of that, and you're going to do it to both sides of the equation. So let's take a look at this equation. 2 times the quantity j plus 1 equals 6. The coefficient is 2. There's like hidden multiplication. That's really 2 times j plus 1 equals 6. 2 times j plus 1 equals 6. So the first math that I think I encounter, the first operation is multiplication, 2 times j plus 1. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiplying by 2. And my first move is to divide both sides of the equation by 2. So I see multiplication, which is, this is times 2. And instead, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Okay? This is the opposite. Now, when you divide both sides by 2, 2 times j plus 1 divided by 2 just leaves you one group of j plus 1. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. And now you have a much more simple equation. J plus 1 equals 3. In your head, you already know j has to equal 2. But let's do this, read the equation, and do the opposite of what the equation tells you to do one more time so you can see how this works, right? So it says j plus 1 equals 3. The equation is telling me to add 1 to j, right? So this is what I see, add 1 to j. And the opposite of that is to subtract 1 from both sides of the equation. Both sides. Do the opposite of what this equation is telling you to do to both sides of the equation. So j plus 1 minus 1 equals 3 minus 1. 1 minus 1 just gets you 0. So you're just left with j. And 3 minus 1 is 2. And there's your answer. J equals 2. There's other ways you could solve this problem. You could have distributed the 2 first if you wanted. But I'm just doing this way. Let's see, j equals 2. And one way to know whether or not your answer is right before you hit the submit button is to substitute this 2 for j, replace the j with 2 and see if it works, right? So 2 times 2 plus 1, which is 3. Does that equal 6? This is my check. So this is 3 times 2, and that equals 6 equals 6. That works. I know my answer is right. I can hit submit. And just really quickly, some of you saw this parentheses and you thought distributed property, which is great. You can do distributed property. You get 2j plus 2 equals 6. Then same thing. Read the equation, do the opposite. It's telling me to add 2 to 2j. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and that's going to leave me with 2j equals 4. 2 times j, do the opposite of that. Divide by 2 instead of multiplying 2 times j, and you get j equals 2. So if you did distributed property, you would have gotten the same answer. You hit submit, and you're good to go. Woohoo! Now, same thing here. We can go a couple of ways. I think this time I am actually going to use the distributed property force. So 2 times y minus 7 minus 2 equals 4. I'm actually going to go back to my solving equations cheat sheet here. It says simplify expressions by combining like terms and using the distributed property. I'm going to do number 1 first. There you go. 2. So step 1, my move is the distributed property. Actually, yeah, distributed property. And let me clean this up a little bit. There's our original equation. And I'm just going to write this here. 2 times y minus 7 minus 2 equals 4. And my first move is the distributive property. Distribute the 2. And I'm going to go here. That means I'm multiplying the 2 times everything inside the parentheses, and that's going to give me 2y minus 14 minus 2 equals 4. My next move after that is to combine like terms. So I have 2y minus 14 minus 2. So minus 14 minus 2 is minus 16. There you go. My next move is, put this in purple. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to read the equation. I'm going to do the opposite of what it tells me to do. So 2 times y minus 16 equals 4. It is telling me that I want to subtract 16 from 2y. So I'm going to do the opposite of subtraction, which is to add 16 to both sides. So this becomes 2y minus 16 plus 16 equals 4 plus 16. And minus 16 plus 16 is just 0, so we've simplified our equation. And that leaves me with 2y equals 4 plus 16, which is 20. Now, go back here, read the equation, do the opposite of what the equation tells me. 2y is the same as 2 times y equals 20. So instead of multiplying y by 2, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I'm doing the opposite of multiplying by 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So 2y divided by 2, 20 divided by 2. If I have 2 y's and I take half of that, then I'm just left with 1 y. And 20 divided by 2 is 10. Now I'm going to check and substitute. Is my answer correct? Before I hit submit, I'm going to take 10 and I'm going to replace y with 10. So 10 minus 7 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 2 equals 4. And 4 equals 4. That is happy. 2 times 10 minus 7 minus 2. Does that equal 4? It does. This is just 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 4. That's great. We know we did it right. Let's enter that answer, y equals 10, hit submit, and we're good. I'll do one more example. Oh, I love this. Okay, 5z plus 7 equals negative 5 plus z. That's my original equation. I'm going to do the opposite of what the equation tells me to do. And that's how I'm going to get all my z's, all my variables on one side, and all my constants, the 7 and the 2 together on the right side of the equation. And then that's how it's going to help me solve. So I'm going to look over here. This says plus z. So I'm going to do the opposite of that. It's telling me to add z to negative 5. I'm going to subtract z from both sides. So minus z and 5z minus z. 5z, take away 1z, leaves you with 4 z's plus 7 equals negative 5. Z minus z is just 0. See how they cancel out and you simplify? So I'm just left with 4z plus 7 equals negative 5. Now, I read that equation. 4z plus 7 equals negative 5. It's telling me to add 7 to 4z. And so I'm going to do the opposite of that. Instead of adding 7 to 4z, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So just read the equation and just do the opposite math from what it says. You don't have to think about what to do. Just look at the equation, read it out to yourself, and whatever math operation you hear in the equation, you do the opposite of it to both sides. And you just step by step do that, and you're going to solve equations. So subtract 7 from both sides. That's the opposite of adding 7. So 7 minus 7 is 0. Negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. So I'm left with 4z equals negative 12. And remember, 4z is the same as 4 times z. So there's like a hidden multiplication in there. And when you see that math operation, 4 times z, do the opposite of it. So instead of multiplying z by 4, divide both sides by 4. So we subtracted z from both sides. That was our first move. We subtracted 7 from both sides. That was our third move. And now our last move is divide both sides by 4. So I divide by 4. 4z divided by 4 is 1z. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. There's my answer. Let's check it. Let's replace anywhere I see a z, I'm going to replace it with negative 3. So 5 times negative 3 plus 7. Is that the same as negative 5 plus negative 3? So negative 5 plus negative 3 is negative 8. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 7 is negative 8. That works. So my answer is good. My answer is negative 3. Enter. Bam. Good job, Mr. Chang. Thank you. All right. If you need help, office hours all next week. 55K for you. Adios.